Yay, it's story time! Shuffle up and settle down and we can begin our story. Trick or treat. A witch, a monster, a pumpkin and me went out trick-or-treating on Halloween. There was candy out there and we wanted lots, so we took our monster-sized Halloween pots. The sky was dark, the stars twinkled bright. The evening was perfect for giving a fright. We started on our street, knocked at a door, but when it was opened, guess what we saw? There stood a woman with cabbage green hair, a pointy hat and a goggle-eyed stare. Trick or treat, we mumbled, shuffling about. She gave us some candy and we slunk out. The night was still young, we weren't afraid. We carried on with our masquerade. We marched round the corner, knocked at a door, then, when it opened, guess what we saw? There stood a huge man as tall as a bus, with glowering eyes towering over us. Trick or treat was all we managed to say. He gave us some candy and we crept away. There's no denying that we had a fright, so we gathered under the brightest street light. We counted the candy, it was looking grave, but we'd come this far and we had to be brave. Our Halloween pots were still half empty. We weren't going home until we had plenty. Next stop, the park, where we knocked at a door. It creaked open slowly, and guess what we saw? There crouched a character wearing a cape, with a deathly pale face and peculiar shape. Trick or treat, we whispered under our breath. We took the candy, but were scared to death. Our hearts were racing, the sky was black. With candy still out there, we weren't going back. We chased down the avenue, knocked at a door. As it flung open, guess what we saw? There stood a man with a wide, hairy nose, so dark and cavernous that we just froze. Trick or treat, we squeaked to the freaky man. He gave us some candy, and we just ran. The moon shone above. It was growing quite late as we hurried past the cemetery gate. At the corner we stopped and knocked at a door. When it sprang open, can you guess what we saw? There stood a creature, huge teeth in its jaws, great hairy toes and enormous claws. Trick or treat, we shrieked, almost glued to the spot. We took the candy, then ran like a shot. We'd come a long way and we'd been tough. We counted the candy, we had almost enough. We carried on with our trick or treat, up and down the dark spooky street. A witch, a monster, a pumpkin and me went this way and that way on Halloween. We knocked on the doors of each house and then crisscrossed the street and went home again. On Halloween, if your costume is good, the generous folk in your neighbourhood have plenty of candy at every door to fill up your trick-or-treat pots for sure. My advice to you, trick or treat if you dare, but you'd better be prepared for a scare. It's spooky round here on Halloween, so be polite and try not to scream. Happy Halloween!